Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
As the country continues to struggle with a cost of living crisis, more and more Canadians are forced to rely on food banks to stock the fridge. And this was clearly shown in the annual hunger count study by Food Banks Canada, which says there are a record number of Canadians using food banks in our country, and it warns that poverty and hunger are now being normalized. The situation creating a stir in the House of Commons, with the opposition blaming the Liberal government for the cost of living crisis, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre taking aim during question period and trying to tie it into the upcoming budget, while House Leader Steve McKinnon defends the feds.
28% went hungry at least once a week. Now the Prime Minister says Canadians will have to make even more sacrifices. How many meals will Canadians have to sacrifice for yet another costly Liberal budget?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Of course there are too many people living in poverty in Canada, but there are significant initiatives being put in place by this government, opposed by this leader of the opposition and his party, systematically evoked in the report from Food Banks Canada today, Mr. Speaker. We support these key assistance programs for Canadians. He votes against them and then dares to get up and criticize us for putting in place support for the weakest Canadians.
The Hunger Count report focuses on the month of March each year as a snapshot of the state of poverty in Canada. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and today on The Big Story, I'm speaking with Kirstin Beardsley, CEO of Food Banks Canada. Kirstin, thanks very much for being here. And of course, you were able to release your report. What did you find this year?
So this year, what we saw is another record-breaking number, which is a record we're not trying to beat. So 2.2 million visits to food banks across Canada in a single month in 2025. And that represents nearly a doubling of food bank use since 2019.
Were you surprised to see that, or were you expecting to see those numbers again?
I think for those of us in food banking, we're expecting to see that there was a growth, another growth number again this year. We know that folks are struggling and we're seeing it at our doors. What I think I was most struck by was just how long it's been since we've had this rate of growth and just the types of folks that we're seeing. So one of the numbers we're tracking really closely is the growth in the number of people who have jobs who are using a food bank. So now it's 1 in 5 food bank users have jobs, but it's still not enough to make ends meet.
And how does that compare to previous years, or I guess before 2019?
It used to be that about 11-12% of food bank users had employment as their primary source of income. And in the last few years, we've just seen that number tick up. So now we're at 20%. In some demographics, that's even higher. So again, it's folks who have jobs, and that is still not enough to pay for the essentials like food, like your rent, like transportation to and from your job, and they're having to rely on food banks.
Well, it's not just working adults who are accessing this. You also track the number of children.
Absolutely. So that's the most heartbreaking stat in all of food banking. About a third of the people who rely on food banks every single month are children. And, it's just heartbreaking to think about, these are kids going to school without food in their lunches. They're coming home, not having a meal available to them. And at an age where they should be going to school and, getting the food they need and the nutrition they need to focus and learn and make friends and thrive, they're not having that opportunity. And so that is one that really hits at my heartstrings.
Now, we've all heard about the cost of living crisis. Why are you seeing the numbers increase this much when we're so far removed from the pandemic?
Well, what we're seeing is folks who, especially low-income folks, are spending so much of their income on essentials that there is no way of digging out of it. So one of the findings that really shocked me was just that Folks who are, as I said, low income are spending about 70% of their income on just housing. It's 30% should be, under 30% is what's considered affordable. But the folks that we see are spending far more than that on their housing alone. When you add in food and when you add in transportation, the average is that folks are spending 123% of their income on essentials. And you can't take a break from your rent. So we say rent eats food. So you flex on other things, and food is often the budget line that you'll flex on.
But I guess I'm looking more broadly about why we're seeing people struggling this much. Do you blame, is it still the pandemic effect that the country is still going through? Is it the trade war with Trump that was throwing off maybe some progress that we had before? Or are there other issues I'm not thinking of off the top of my head? Why do you think so many people are struggling so much at this moment?
Yeah, it's both of those things. So it's the cost of living crisis. It's the fact that incomes haven't kept up with costs, and it's also this compounding effect. So when you're spending more money every month than you have coming in, it doesn't easily get better. So if you're falling deeper and deeper into debt or deeper and deeper into poverty every month, and so even if things start to get better, you're still climbing out of that hole. And so yeah, it's a lot of contributing factors. We're also seeing unemployment tick up, and as unemployment ticks up, that does impact food bank use as well, as people lose their jobs and don't have access to those incomes. So right now, it's a number of factors that are driving people to food banks.
You mentioned earlier about seeing these increases year over year. Have you ever seen like a 5 or 6 year period like this where we've seen such a dramatic rise? I mean, some places are seeing well over 100% in terms of food bank usage in some provinces. So have you ever seen anything like this before?
Absolutely not. So this is the steepest growth that we've ever seen. Food banks in Canada started in the 1980s. It took us decades to get to 1 million visits a month. And that's where we were prior to the pandemic. It's taken us 6 short years to double that number. So we've never seen a rate of growth. The only other time we saw a spike in use was after the 2008 economic downturn. But that was a smaller rate of growth, and it took a few more years for us to reach that peak. And then we sort of plateaued heading into the pandemic, but we've never seen anything like this. And, when you think about food bankers and how hard they work, imagine having to do all that hard work and then double it in a very short span of time. It's incredible what they've been able to do.
And we'll have more on the big story with Kirstin Beardsley, the CEO of Food Banks Canada, in just a moment. I know you're looking for federal help, and we'll discuss that in a moment, but I'm wondering if you can also help me break down some of the provincial numbers. Where are we seeing the largest increases in the country, and where have we maybe luckily not seen as much of an increase?
Yeah, so we've seen increases across the board, across Canada in the last 6 years. So every province has seen an increase in food bank use. Since last year, Alberta has seen the highest rate of increase. But overall, since prior to the pandemic, it's the big provinces. So Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec have all seen triple-digit rates of growth in food bank use across the country. And that has to do with higher costs of living, potentially less availability of jobs for folks. So it's just these compounding crises that make folks have to make impossible choices.
And how much was Alberta's increase?
Alberta, since last year, was a 22% increase in food bank use, whereas nationally it was 5%.
And yet there's one province, British Columbia, that's kind of bucking the trend a little bit. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so BC has seen a bit of a stabilization. So they haven't seen an increase year over year, which is very positive to see, but they have seen 80% since prior to the pandemic. So they have still seen a very significant growth in need. But this year we're seeing maybe some signs that food bank use in BC is stabilized.
Is there a reason for that, do you think? Or is their market just a little bit more protected from the domestic and international stresses that everyone's facing right now?
It could be that costs have been high for so long that folks have been able to absorb those in different ways. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what is happening in BC, but we'll continue to look for signs of what is actually working in those provinces where we're seeing some stabilization and share those with the provinces where we're seeing continued growth.
You're calling for some specific actions that you want to see to try and help reverse this disturbing trend of year over year over year increases that we've been seeing. What exactly are you calling on the federal government to do?
Well, we have some really practical proposals that we think are feasible for the government as we look towards this next budget. The first and most significant is the reforming EI. So we have an EI system in Canada that was built for the workforce of the 1990s. It doesn't support the workforce of today with a lot of precarious work, gig economy work, a lot of more self-employment. We need people when they lose their job, if they happen to lose their job, to not fall off a cliff into deep poverty because as we've seen, it's incredibly hard to crawl your way out of it. We also are calling on the government to implement a groceries and essentials benefit. So this is an immediate support for people with low incomes so that they can afford to go to the grocery store and aren't having to go further and further into debt just to pay for those essentials.
There's also you're looking to expand the disability benefit, and you've mentioned the North as well. Can you tell me a little bit more about those?
Sure. The Canada Disability Benefit was an amazing announcement by the federal government. We know a significant portion of folks who use food banks have disabilities and rely on both provincial and federal disability support. So we needed a federal Canada Disability Benefit. Unfortunately, it's not as robust as we had hoped, as those of us advocating for it had hoped. And so we're asking for that to be fully funded and for more funds to go into the Canada Disability Benefit so that folks who have disabilities, and in often cases disabilities that don't allow them to work in the traditional workforce, have access to incomes that make sure that they can purchase food for themselves and other essentials. For the North, we see northern food insecurity is much higher than it is in the South, and we need the government to ensure that that comes down. So even these numbers that we're talking about across Canada are much higher in the North, and so we're asking for the government to make some changes there, including look at the Nutrition North program in partnership with Indigenous communities to bring the costs of food down for folks in the North.
And when it comes to this groceries benefit for low-income Canadians, how would that look? Is it just going to be money that would be put into their paycheck out of hopes that it would go towards the essentials and groceries, or would there be sort of a conditional aspect to it? What are you looking for with that program?
What we're looking for is an adaptation of the GST credit, which already exists and has been used by the government during times of increased cost to support low-income folks, making that a monthly payment versus a quarterly payment, something that people can actually rely on a more regular basis, and making it increasing the amount that folks would get so that, again, they could pay for essentials.
Out of all of these measures, have you costed anything out, or are you leaving that up to the government? Because you did mention that the disability benefit was not as much as you had hoped. So are there certain figures that you've attached to some of these promises that you say, at bare minimum this, and so that the government has a target to work with?
Yeah, so the Canada Disability Benefit as an example was, a lot of folks in the disability community took the lead to advocate for that and did a lot of robust studying, including costing of the benefit. And that is, the government has all of that information. It was shared with them. So, when we look at costs, what I really want to say is, think of the costs that we have right now on the future of the country. We're talking a lot right now about building a strong Canada, making sure that we're prepared for the challenges ahead. And we have a quarter of the population that is experiencing food insecurity. We have 2.2 million visits to food banks every month. There is a cost to to that. We need to make sure that people have the food that they need to be able to thrive so that our country can meet its full potential. We're talking a lot here at Food Banks Canada these days about let's feed greatness. Let's feed the future of the country. And so we can't always look at how much these programs are going to cost, because we also need to look at what inaction is costing us.
Yeah, and give our listeners and viewers a little bit more of an idea of that. What are those benefits that we see throughout society when people are not having to rely on food banks to fill the fridge and try and make ends meet?
But absolutely, it's the ability to have everyone meet their full potential, right? When we are well fed, we all know that feeling. We're better able to focus. We're better able to take care of our lives. We're better able to work, to socialize, to care for each other in our communities. And so when we have such a significant portion of the population in a position where they're not reaching or not able to reach their full potential, we're depriving ourselves. What future could we have built if we made sure that everyone had the food they need to thrive?
In years past, coming out of the pandemic, food banks have talked many years now about being basically at a breaking point, that they just can't keep up. And you mentioned the stress earlier that this is placed on the amazing volunteers and workers who make sure that these food banks run. If you were at a breaking point a few years ago, where are you at now when demand just keeps rising?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy work, and it's not easy work in good days, and these aren't, I will be clear, good days. Food bankers are the most resilient and hardworking folks I know. They are meeting this challenge, but what we're starting to see is some food banks giving out less than they would have hoped, because they don't have enough to give around to all the new folks who are coming through the doors. We're seeing food banks having to spend way more of their budgets on food than ever before because, I mean, let's face it, all of us have been seeing the effect of food costs on our monthly budget. So food banks have spent double on average on food than they did a few years ago. And, it's just, when you think about it, we're community organizations in communities from coast to coast to coast, and we've absorbed a doubling of need. There is a point at which the growth cannot continue to be absorbed. And we need governments and folks across this country to understand just how deep this crisis is.
Have you spoken with anybody from the federal government about these ideas? And if so, have you received any responses? Because we do have the federal budget coming up, and I'm sure you're hoping that some of these measures that you're calling for may appear in the budget.
Yeah, so part of raising our voice as food banks and doing the hunger count is about sharing the data, sharing the stories, really being clear about what we're seeing on the ground. This is critical information for governments at all levels to have. But in particular, as you said, as we head into the budget, this is what we're doing. We're trying to get governments to pay attention. We also know governments pay attention when the people make them pay attention. So we're also calling on everyday folks from coast to coast to coast to read the report, go to foodbankscanada.ca, take a look. Hunger is often a quiet problem in Canada. We don't talk a lot about, I need to go to the food bank this month. We don't share that information, but we need to make this problem loud, and we need to make governments stand up and pay attention.
And just to clarify, have you had any meetings with the minister since you were preparing this report or after?
I haven't personally had any meetings since preparing this report. We're in Ottawa as often as we can to talk to politicians and ministers and talk to them about our priorities and what we're seeing on the ground.
Okay, we'll see what happens with the budget. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you so much.
That was Kirstin Beardsley, the CEO of Food Banks Canada, speaking with me about their hunger count report, which shows a record number of Canadians are using food banks. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and that was The Big Story. You can send us your feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or on all your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. Thanks for listening.